All right. Thanks everyone for taking the time to join this webinar. My name is Pushpendra Bhati, and I work as a client partner in Adactin, and I'll be the facilitator for this webinar. So firstly, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we work, the Daruk people, and pay my respect to their elders past and present. I'm super excited about the webinar today, which is about the power of AI in data testing, elevating data quality for enterprises. We all know that AI is fundamentally changing the way we build software. This joint webinar session will be an engaging session where we all talk about what the industry is doing and where it is heading in terms of data testing and common data quality issues, and how AI is transforming traditional data testing with demo and the real work examples. There would be a Q&A session at the end, so feel free to put your questions in the chat and we'll take them towards the end of the session. And I would like to quickly introduce you to the speakers. So we have got Eric Smith from QuerySearch. Eric comes with 2 decades of experience in quality assurance and he's worked in global 1,000 clients. And he's been a mentor for many QA professionals. And along with joining him is Ravi Gampu. Ravi Gampu heads the quality engineering at Adactin, and he comes with a very strong testing background, and he's spearheading all these next-gen solutions through scalable frameworks and optimized time, cost, and quality. Just want to give a quick brief about Adactin. So Adactin is a next-generation technology service provider delivering end-to-end digital transformation in Microsoft and AWS ecosystem and AI-powered digital engineering and future-ready quality assurance. So Adactin is empaneled in numerous government panels through which we are supporting the government and the other organizations. And this is just this industry snapshot where Adactin is working in education, energy, banking, health, and insurance domain. Now I would like to invite Ravi to start his presentation.
Thanks, Push, for the kind of a very nice introduction. Uh, let's start before we even deep dive into the actual AI and the data testing. Probably I would like to start by looking at the enterprise data challenges that most organizations are facing today. Let's start with the data sources and the integration. Enterprise rarely work with with just one system. So they typically deal with multiple complex systems like ERPs or CRMs or traditional or legacy mainframe systems and the cloud applications. So they have a variety of these platforms which are integrated together, and then the business processes are built on the top. So what is basically comes is because of these complex integrations, so they have schema, like a spread of different data varieties, data formats, schema formats, so which makes the data landscape very complex. Let's go to another problem statement of looking at the scale and the dynamics. So when we're talking about the scale and the dynamics, let's say into one dimension called as a data volume. The kind of the data volumes are on an exploding momentum. When we are talking about the volume of the data and the data flowing in the real time at a very high velocity, when all these systems are integrated to each other, so the schema drift is one of the very key things or the critical things in this, where it keeps shifting when the data structures are on an evolving stage, or when new data formats get introduced. So because of these different data structures and these different data formats, it becomes complex and complex when we try to handle the data and try to validate the data at multiple layers of the business workflows or the application landscapes. One of the other third problems is, now we know there are different formats of the data and the data keeps evolving, or the formats or the schemas keep evolving. When we start processing, which is the actual one of the very critical milestones in the entire data validation landscape, becomes even more challenging. So when we look at like a traditional ELT or ETL kind of a processing, because of these complexities and the intricacies involved in the data handling, it even becomes challenging when we try to build the pipelines of ELT or the ETL, and that's where uh, 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 handling the data inconsistencies becomes a very challenging part. And with all this, the data quality and the monitoring part is even more challenging. So why we are saying that the data quality and the monitoring is even challenging is this is exactly the stage where the cracks, especially at the data layer, starts popping out. So in order to ensure that where the data gaps are, so we need to have constant monitoring and we need to have those observability layer on the top to ensure that these gaps are not popping up and make sure that we have a proactive mechanisms in place to ensure these are all closed up. So with all these kind of the complexities at an enterprise level comes another one of the layer called as an compliance and the risk. So at times, all the organizations have to adhere to the compliance and the regulatory frameworks like GDPR or HIPAA compliance or the SOX compliance, and makes even more complex and challenging when it comes to the enterprise data challenges. So taken together with all these kind of the problem statements, these challenges show it's not about only the data handling or the data quality or the monitoring part, and it becomes even a bigger problem sitting at a very enterprise level. So today, we'll go into a little bit another layer of the complex layer where we talk about what are the different challenges when we are kind of like handling data at the multiple layers, and look at a little bit more deep dive into the complexities involved at the ETL pipelines and the data validation. As I mentioned, like there will be heterogeneous kind of a sources, like where we are talking about multiple sources of the data. Either it can be from a CRM platform, or it can be from a legacy platform, or it can be from from an integration layer landscape perspective. So because of the different data structures, different schema formats, different varieties of the data, different volumes of the data comes into the play, where they are driving different business workflows and the processes on the top, it becomes very complex when you start doing the validation, at the data landscape. The other part is the duplication and the redundancy. Let's say there is a huge transformation layer, there is a huge translation layers getting embedded into these workflows. Because of these multiple formats or evolving schema formats throughout, it even becomes challenge to understand where the duplication exists. How can you ensure to reduce the redundancy part as well? And even this is where the importance of the orchestration comes into the play. Having said that, there are multiple data varieties, there are multiple data landscapes, there are multiple data lakes, or the database is getting involved, which there are multiple sources involved, and then kind of like multiple targets are involved on the other side. This is where the orchestration becomes even one of the very critical things when it comes to the data validation aspect. Obviously, as I kind of like emphasized a little bit more on the data transformation or even the data translation, because of the multiple integration landscapes getting involved into this landscape. So we need to ensure that the repeatable processes are getting involved. Like, let's say, for example, traditionally we kind of like bring in a tool and we manually use the tool to ensure that we enable these data validation checks using the pipelines. But the ultimate question is that good enough to solve these kind of complexities? So this is where exactly a game changer came into the picture by using the AI. So when it comes into the AI into the play, this is where it is the capability of the AI comes into the play. It is trying to address lot of very niche, lot of kind of very intricate problems within this data landscape. So when how let's look into a couple of use cases here. Let's say, for example, anomaly detection. So we know because of this huge complex data landscape layers, huge different schema formats available in the data landscape. The most important part is how proactive are we to enable or to identify these kind of issues way before even it gets into the data validation layer. This is where exactly the AI comes into the picture, enables that proactive mechanism into understanding these large data sets automatically, identify the spikes, identify the drops in the real time, and try to flag the unusual patterns way before it even goes into the data validation lifecycle. Let's look into the schema validation as well. Yes, as I kind of like emphasize a little bit on, the schema keeps evolving all the time. The volume keeps evolving all the time. The data changes all the time. There might be additions, there might be deletions, there might be modifications, there might be amendments to the data throughout the application lifecycle evolvement. So as the application evolves, the data keeps evolving. As the new system gets introduced, a new format gets introduced. But the ultimate goal is to ensure that the system should adapt to these changes and make sure that it builds a consistent mechanism of doing the data validation checks way before it comes into the data validation layer. Predictive data quality is one of the other most important aspects, like with the kind of a historical data patterns in the system. It has to ensure that it learns through the historical data sets and try to have a prediction layer or the forecast mechanism in place to ensure that these are the potential probable areas where the data problems can come into picture, and then try to put that feedback mechanism to the data testers behind the curtain so that they can make sure they look into those predictive analyses and ensure that they enable those mechanisms in place as part of the data validation. Continuous and intelligent validation is one of the most important aspects, because we, in general, so most of the times we deal with the static data, and then we have a very defined list of the checklists we normally go through when we go through the data validation checks. But in here, when we bring AI into the play, this is where exactly the adaptability comes into the play with the AI. Make sure that, there are so many changes happening at the system layer, at the application layer, at the data layer. Your data mechanism will adapt to these changes in real time, goes back and then tries to ensure that there are no anomalies detected. If there are any anomalies detected, they'll flag it accordingly. Make sure there is a data correction or the self-healing kind of a mechanism embedded into the process, so that the data cleansing or the data referential integrity checks are also embedded into the process. At the same time, it is trying to reduce a huge manual effort of where we regularly try to invest our time and effort to ensure that these problems are getting addressed. Obviously, the ultimate goal is to fast track this mechanism as well, especially in the testing lifecycle. So this is where the actual shift left data quality checks happens way upfront in the life cycle, to ensure that we feed the feedback to the developers, or to the data developers, or the database developers, or even to the integration developers, to ensure that these are all kind of like the issues occurring, and then make sure that we have that corrective mechanism way upfront. So obviously it will reduce the cost of the defect fixing down the line. So this is where exactly Adaptin has partnered with Query Search, and then we are doing some exciting stuff of bringing the AI capabilities into the play of especially the data landscape. This is where I pass on the next set of the presentation to Eric, who will be walking us through the exciting part along with the demo, where how exactly the AI helps in especially in the data testing landscape. Over to you, Eric. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravi, and thank you everyone for joining. And I would like to thank Adaptin for inviting me to co-host and present this session. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to start my slide deck. And what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about Query Search, and then specifically how we're using AI to kind of help solve some of the challenges that our customers are encountering. So as an overview, Query Search is the smart data testing solution that automates the data validation ET testing of your critical data that will improve your data quality at speed. So it's a data validation tool that is going to be used to automate your data testing, specifically when you're dealing with large volumes, to be able to do it quickly and efficiently. Since we launched Query Surge, we have over 250 customers in 35 different countries. This is a partial list. We have a more extensive list on our website. But one of the things I tell prospects and customers is no matter what industry you're in, you're collecting large amounts of data, and companies are struggling with the same challenges, which is how do we test all of this data quickly in an effective manner? And all these different companies in these various different industries chose Query Surge for their solution. The different use cases that Query Surge supports, any type of data warehousing projects where you have multiple data sources that are being ETL'd into your data warehouse or data marts is a great use case for Query Surge. Data migration projects where you are comparing pre-migration to post-migration data. Query Surge can validate all of that information. Any big data initiatives, whether you're dealing with cloud storage platforms or NoSQL data stores, Query Surge can validate the data as it enters and leaves those systems. BI and analytics efforts, Query Surge has the capability of testing data that resides in BI reports, and you can compare that data to other reports, to data marts that may be feeding those reports or the original source data. Enterprise apps or ERP systems, if you're doing data modernization projects, you need to check to make sure all the data is getting into those new systems. Query Surge can verify that as well. And with all these different initiatives, you can integrate Query Surge as part of your DevOps and DataOps pipelines. So in essence, the way Query Surge works is we have a concept of a test, which we call a query pair. And when you set up that test, you define your two endpoints. You define your source system and your target system. Your source system may be a traditional database, maybe a file, could be a web service or some type of API request. And then you'll specify your target system, which may be your data lake, your data warehouse, your BI report. And what happens is at the time of test execution, what Query Surge will do is it will request data from both of these systems. We'll bring back analogous result sets, and we'll look to compare every single cell of every single record in those data sets and look for any type of data anomaly, such as maybe a source record that didn't make it into the target system, or maybe there was an aggregate calculation done with the source data and the value that's displayed in the target data set is incorrect, or any other type of data issue that you may encounter with these standard types of ETL jobs. And then what Query Surge will do is it will take all that information and it will roll it up into reports and graphs so customers get a good holistic view of their data, have an idea of the percentage of data that's correct, where the issues are, and can really drill down and determine where their problems are. And Query Surge can send out notifications, whether it be email or Teams or Slack messages, so users will know specifically when issues occur in real time. So one of the things we explored about a year ago as AI started becoming prominent is there a place in what Query Surge already does where AI can solve a specific challenge that will add value to our customers? So our team did some exploration and found a great solution and a great fit for what Query Surge can leverage AI for. So before I go into that, just talk a little bit about the traditional testing process for data, and then you'll see as we go through this where AI can really be a great fit. So typically when organizations are testing data, a lot of it is still to this day done manually. And typically the process is you have an ETL tester who is developing SQL against both a source and target system. They're executing those tests by running that SQL, bringing back data sets, and then they need to do the analysis of the data to verify that the data in the two systems is correct, is matching, is being processed properly. During this traditional process, there's kind of two areas that take the majority of the time. The first is the test development, which is the ability to create the SQL that is needed. This is typically done when teams are reviewing requirements or mapping documents, as they're typically called for your data projects. And then making sure that the SQL is pulling back the data that is expected. And then the second piece of it is the validation part. How do we compare and validate and make sure all this data is correct? If the data sets are small, then you only have a small sample, there's a huge risk there because you may not have enough data to verify that these jobs are working as intended and things can slip through the cracks. And of course, the larger the volume of the data you're testing, the longer it's going to take for your manual tester to be able to go through all that data and make sure it's correct. So with Query Surge, we addressed one of these time sinks really well, which is the validation part. Query Surge has the capability to validate millions and billions of records. We can run tests in parallel. We can get real-time reporting based off of the results. So traditionally, Query Surge has always done a great job and saved a lot of time over manual testing on the back end of that process. But in order for Query Surge to work, we still had to have the SQL that was needed to be able to request the data for the testing to take place. And that still took some time. So with the introduction of AI, we tried to see if it could address that specific challenge. And what we found is these AI engines do a great job of writing SQL if you can provide it the right information in order to create the tests. And that's what we've done with our new Query Surge AI component. So with Query Surge AI, we use an AI engine to help develop the SQL based off of the mappings, which can drastically reduce the overall time it takes to generate your data tests. And then those tests can quickly be executed and you can get results very fast. So you can go from essentially the requirements from your data side to getting test results really quickly within a couple of hours, where before that process could be significantly longer in your testing cycle. So basically the way it works is we work off of the premise that there has to be some type of requirements that you're using to define what your data tests are. And as I mentioned, they're typically stored in what we refer to as a mapping document. So what Query Surge AI does is it consumes that mapping document, loads that information up, and then is going to pass it to an AI engine. And then the AI engine is going to interpret the information in the mapping document, and it will generate not only the tests that are going to be executed in Query Surge, but the SQL that will be used in those tests. And what we found is, for a traditional data testing project, sometimes that SQL can get pretty involved, where you're joining across multiple tables, you're applying lots of filters, you may be using functions to do parsing and different types of actions. And the AI engine can actually do that and create the SQL needed for those processes to take place. So the big benefit to implementing AI with Query Surge is you're going to get a dramatic time saving, both on that test design phase and then the traditional way Query Surge does the validation. The other thing it really helps is prior to Query Surge AI, the people developing the tests really had to have really strong SQL skills, because in order to do some of the test building, they'd be having to write this SQL manually. Now, while it's still really beneficial to have those SQL skills, you could probably use Query Surge AI and get away with someone with moderate skills to do the same work, because the AI is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting. The tester may only have to make adjustments here or there, or kind of verify that what the AI is doing is correct. And from a cost perspective, because of the way we're using AI, the amount of tokens is pretty light. So Query Surge is actually including the AI piece as part of its standard deployment. The only kind of small caveat there is we are using an API component, so there's a DevOps for data module that you will have to have included in order to take advantage of this AI solution. So with that, I'd like to now jump into the product demonstration. So what I'm going to do now is share my screen. And what you should be seeing is the Query Surge interface. Query Surge is accessed through your browser. So when the testers are going to be creating their tests and running their tests, they're going to be doing it through their browser in Query Surge. And what you're looking at here is the design library. So this is where you would store the tests that you're going to be executing. And what you'll see here in this particular folder called customers, I have several tests that have already been created. They have their names, modified dates, and they also have a little status icon indicating the last time the test ran, whether it was successful or whether it failed. So before I jump into the AI piece, I'm just going to show a little bit of what Query Search does so you have an idea of where kind of the AI component fits in. So if I double click on one of these query pairs, it's going to open up, and what you'll see is there are two sides. There's a source on the left, and then there's a target on the right. Both source and target have this connection dropdown, which is what you are defining as your source and target for this particular test. So you can see in this example, I have an Oracle Sales Database as my source. I have an Oracle Data Warehouse as my target. So I'm comparing data between those two systems. But Query Search has the ability to compare data between any system that it's able to connect with. So traditional databases, BI tools, NoSQL data stores. You can see I have quite a few listed here, as this is a demo environment where we've set up connections to all different types of platforms. So as long as Query Search is able to connect to that platform, you are able to bring in data and then compare data between the different systems that you may be testing. So when we go in and open up one of these tests, and you could see some of the tests can get quite complicated with the SQL, where you're joining across tables, where you're setting multiple filters, and this is where the complexity of these tests can get complicated depending upon the business rules. But when they execute, Query Search returns a result that looks something like this, where it's going to tell you whether the test passed. It's going to show you how many records are retrieved, both from your source and your target data set. It's going to determine if there's any row differences between them. You'll see those numbers match up above, so there's no difference. But it also says that there were 7 failed row counts. So what that means is we tested every record, but there were 7 of them that had some type of mismatch in data between the source and target. And when we drill into that a little deeper, Query Search will show you not only the source data from your source system, the data from your target system, but it's also going to show you any data differences between the two. And if you remember from that previous screen, we said that there were 7 failed records. So these are the 7 source records that don't match up with the 7 target records. And you'll see any of the cells that are highlighted in red indicate that there was a data mismatch between the two systems. And this is typically where you'd have to determine, is this a defect? Why is this data different? And you might pass along this information to the development team so that they can work on it and try to resolve the issue. So that's a little overview of how Query Search works. So now what I'd like to show you is how the AI component can help us. So as I mentioned, if you look at these queries, they can get pretty complex. So what we're looking for is there a way that AI can help us generate the SQL that we need for our testing effort? And that's where the Query Search AI component is going to come in. So what you'll see is I navigated to a folder called QSAI in the Query Search environment. And you'll see right now that folder is empty. It doesn't contain any tests. So we're starting from scratch for this particular folder. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to populate this folder with information using Query Search AI. So Query Search AI is a utility that works with Query Search. There's a few initial setup steps that need to be done. You connect it to your Query Search instance, you connect it to your AI engine, you connect it to your Query Search project, and so forth. But once you've done all that, you launch the AI, the Query Search AI interface, this is the screen that you'll see. And the first thing you're going to be asked to do is to load a mapping file. So the mapping file is the document which is going to contain the requirements for my tests. So I click the Browse button, and I navigate to our mapping document. And what it's going to do is it's going to take the information from that document and load it up into the Query Search AI interface. And what you'll notice when it does that, it's going to create a test for each mapping in the document. It's going to have information about the schemas of both your source and target systems that you're working with. But you'll see right now in the section for the source SQL and the target SQL, there's nothing here. because the mapping information doesn't contain any of that. It just contains the rules for the transformation of the data as it moves between systems in your data architecture. So the next step is we are going to click this generate button. And what that is going to do is it's going to pass the schema information to the AI engine, and the AI engine is going to return us the SQL for these tests that it's going to create. So it's going to take a moment to run. So while that's running, I just want to show you what these mapping documents look like. So the mapping documents are a standard Excel sheet, but what you'll see is there's specific columns that are listed that are giving the AI engine what it needs to generate the SQL. These first two are just informational. You have a mapping reference number and then a query pair name. This is essentially the name of the test as it's going to be created in Query Search. You'll see there's a column here for source technology. The reason this is important is different databases have different SQL syntax. So by specifying the technology, you're ensuring that the AI is going to generate SQL for the proper database that you're going to be running these queries against. The source connection is an ID for the connections in Query Search, so it's able to automatically populate those dropdowns in the test. And then the next couple fields are what you see in most typical mapping documents. You'll have the table name, the column names, the keys to those tables, and then the key field is the transformation logic. And this is written in plain text, what has to happen to the source data to be successfully loaded into the target system. Typically, there's transformations like field splitting or field merging or transposing. These are the types of things that happen. And you can simply write that in plain text, what has to happen to the data in order for it to load in the target system. You can see here, some of these get pretty complicated, where we're applying multiple filters, where we're doing a transposing of one set of values to another. There's some aggregates being done. If there's no transformation logic, we can just say it's a direct map, or it's the same in both systems. And you can even put in some business rules specifically if needed. And then you'll see the same information, if I scroll over, on the target side. The technology, the connection, table, column, keys. And in many cases, you may not have any target logic because you may just be running a straight query against your target system, but we have this column here in case you do need to put some type of filtering on the target query as well. And this should be completed at this point. So if I navigate back to Query Search AI, what you'll see is now for each one of these tests, both the SQL for the source and the target have been populated by the AI engine. And what you can see is some of these queries can be pretty complex. This one's using a function for the database in order to do some string parsing. Some of them can have case statements where they're doing some transposing of the data. Others might have some type of aggregate being done to get a specific value. So the transformation logic, even if it's fairly sophisticated, can be handled by the AI engine. And the last step of this process is once we've created all these tests in the Query Search AI component, we want to then bring them into the main Query Search product. And that's where this import button comes in. So we click the import button. It's going to take all the information that was generated by Query Search AI. It's going to bring it into the core Query Search product. And once that is complete, what I can do is I can go back to my browser. And when I navigate back there and I hit the refresh button on the screen, what you'll see is now I have these newly created tests within Query Search. And if you drill into these tests, you'll see just like we saw previously, we have the two connections populated, and then we have the SQL that was generated from AI. And as you can see, some of these can get pretty complex in what the SQL can generate. This one's joining, multiple tables, applying multiple filters on both sides, again, aggregates, different things, and so forth. So what this really enables us to do is it enables us to go from requirements, where we were with the mapping document just a few minutes ago, to test execution. Now that I've developed all these tests, I can go into the scheduling area of Query Search. I can go to what we call a test suite, which is just a collection of query pairs. And what I can do with that is I can go to my newly created Query Search AI folder. I can drop all these tests in, and I am ready to save. And then I am ready to start executing tests. So by kicking that off, we are running what's called a scenario in Query Search, which is a collection of tests that we're going to be executing in bulk. And what you'll see, the orange icon indicates that scenario that I just triggered is running. You have the bar and line graphs, which are giving you indications of the current status of where those tests are running. And then you can get their current status in the summary metrics in the upper right. So you can see some tests are still running, some have passed, some have failed. And even before they're finished, Query Search gives you the capability of kind of drilling in, looking at the data sets, and where you can see the source data, the target data, and then, if there are failures, investigate the failures as we saw before. So hopefully that gives you kind of an idea of how AI is currently being used in Query Search and in data testing. As you can imagine, we are looking for new ways and different ways to leverage AI, all aspects, not only for data testing, but of course for our Query Search product. And as the AI engines become more mature and can do more things, we're going to be looking and finding new ways to integrate AI into what we're doing on the Query Search team. So that completes the demo, and I'm going to turn it back over to the Adactin team.
Thank you so much, Eric. It was really very insightful session, and it's very excited to see how Query Search is leveraging AI to make data testing very easier. So that's a good one. We will now start taking question answers. Please use the Q&A icon to post your questions. I've got a question here. Does the mapping document be in the standard format always, or having the same column names, or AI engine can take any mapping format?
Yeah, so that's a great question. In its current iteration, we provide that mapping template in order for you to use it. It does require that specific template. So you will have to take whatever format your mapping document is in and kind of massage or move the data into the template that we are using. For some of our customers, we help them with that, and that's where we use teams like our partners like Adactin, because they have the experience to kind of do those types of tasks. But we are exploring different ways to make it more dynamic, so where, if you have your mapping documents in a different format, to be able to kind of, I guess, point to what field you have and to map it to what Query Search needs. So again, long answer, but currently we do require it to be in our template, but we are working on new ways that will be available soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eric. I've got another question coming here, which is about, does Query Search install locally for each user, or is it a web-based application?
Yeah, so great question. Query Search is a web-based application, so each user does not have to install it on their machines. However, it is not a SaaS solution. So what I mean by that is Query Search always gets installed and deployed somewhere within your infrastructure. So no data is ever sent outside of your network. You install Query Search and it resides within your firewall, within your rules. That can be on-premise. It could also be in the cloud provider of your choice, but you kind of own the infrastructure where Query Search is running.
Great, thank you. There's one more question. Does Query Search AI require the use of a specific template?
Does Query Search AI require the use of a specific template? I'd say no. Meaning we do have what we call specific prompts that tend to work better than others. So you would, get better results by following those prompts. But if you're referring to kind of the mapping document, then yes, it does require that, mapping document Excel sheet format that I showed earlier.
Thank you. Just looking for more questions there. Is there any way to ensure data security, Eric?
So there's two pieces of this. One is Query Surge itself, and the other is the AI component. From Query Surge perspective, as I mentioned, it goes in your infrastructure. So you can put whatever type of security you want around it. You can configure it with encryption. You can configure it with disk encryption. There's different things that you can do. No data will be sent outside of your system. So, it's pretty secure. Now, from the AI piece, we actually have two versions. We have what's called an AI cloud and an AI core. The AI cloud does use a cloud AI model where the data does get sent, not the data, but the schema information can be sent and transmitted over the wire. But if that's a security concern, we also have the AI core where you can set up the AI engine internally within your organization. So, depending on, what your security rules are and what needs to be in place, we have options that can handle both.
Thank you, Eric. Next question is, can the tool be integrated with Jira for defect logging and tracking, or that need to be done manually?
No, great question. So we have a couple different options for that. One, Query Surge has a concept of what we call a webhook, which has the capability of triggering an API request both before and after test executions. And for these webhooks, we have some ones that are pre-built, and we have a pre-built one for Jira. So essentially, the way people use it is if a scenario runs that has a failure, you can send a webhook to automatically trigger a defect creation in Jira and pass the information from Query Surge, the tests that ran, the connections and so forth as part of the details for that bug. The other option we have is if you don't want to do it through an API call, we also can do it through an email notification. So Query Surge has the ability to trigger emails, and Jira has the ability to take an email and create an issue from that email. So with those two in conjunction, Query Surge sends the email out, the email triggers a issue creation in Jira.
Thank you. And does it connect to Salesforce or other industry standard CRM tools?
So the nice thing about Query Surge is it can connect almost to anything. We connect through different connectors. So as long as there's a connector that is available, we can use it. Our latest version does have a Salesforce connector, and it allows you to run SOQL, which is, I think, SQL Object Query Language against Salesforce. So they enable you to retrieve data directly out of Salesforce through their API and then compare that against any of the other technologies that Query Surge supports.
Right. I've got another exciting question there. So how does Query Surge AI handle schema changes? Can it automatically update existing test cases, or its role limited to generating new ones only?
Great question. So if you have new tests that need to be created, you can just incrementally load new tests using Query Surge AI. It does not have the capability yet to handle the schema changes. So as of now, what you'd have to do is kind of locate the tests that have changed, kind of remove them and reload them in as part of the scenario. That is something we're working on to make it, because right now the AI is just a push, and that would require it to be bidirectional, which it is not yet, but it is something that we see happening in the future.
Right. There's another question, which is about the various compliance GDPR, HIPAA, etc. If during runtime all specific data is masked by QSAI, Query Surge AI, yeah.
So Query Surge doesn't do any masking. Typically, that is a task that we see done before Query Surge consumes the data. So if there's a masking component that needs to be done, whether that's by creating synthetic data, whether that's masking production data, that is typically done to the data sets before Query Surge starts working with them. Once that masking is in place, Query Surge can execute the queries, retrieve the data, and as long as, of course, we have the key to decrypt it, you can do comparisons and do the validation. The product itself doesn't do any of that, but we can work with other products or other ways that they may be done before Query Surge consumes the data for testing.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. We are getting questions that keep pouring in. So another one is, does it support a data comparison between different data sets like DB against the files, JSON, XML? And does it have API integration capability to get the data using an API call format, the data from the response, and create test pairs?
Yeah, so Query Surge can compare data between any of the platforms that it supports. And it supports obviously all your traditional databases. It also supports files. We have customers testing JSON, XMLs, Parquet files that reside locally, that reside in cloud platforms. Typically, what has to happen is in order for Query Surge to do the validation, that data has to be flattened. Right? If you have a JSON object, it's kind of a nested structure, so you can't compare that nested structure to a tabular database table. So what happens either on the in the SQL piece of it or through some type of mapping that can be a mapping file that can be created, we essentially flatten out that nested information, and that allows you to compare it directly to your database tables. APIs are also supported, and basically the way it works with an API is we'll make the API request, we'll get the response, and then flatten that out again to like a flat file or put it into our own internal database, and then you're able to use that and compare it against other systems.
Great, thanks, Eric. All right. Oh, this was really very insightful session, Ravi and Eric. And everyone.
Sorry, Push. There
Yeah.
is another question.
Yeah, I'll just have a look. All right. Another question is, as AI tools like Query Surge automate many aspects of ETL testing, I'm curious how testers can continue to add value from your experience. What areas should we focus on to ensure QA remains critical in data-heavy projects?
Yeah, so with all of these AI technologies, there's always still a need for manual overview and intervention, right? So while the AI engine does a great job of creating the SQL, it's not going to be able to tell you 100% accurate if it's exactly the data coming back that you want. So even with that test execution that we did, I would recommend that the testers need to review that, need to make sure that the data that's coming back from these queries makes sense, what they're expecting based on the requirements, and then the analysis of the results as well. Obviously, AI is starting to play a bigger part in kind of determining, why failures are occurring and what the potential causes are. But there still has to be that manual oversight to say, hey, does this make sense? Is this what maybe the requirements are wrong, and it takes someone to look at the data to actually see that. So there's still that intuition that a manual tester has that's always going to be needed in these projects. I think you just think of AI as more of a tool to kind of help you, do more with less time, and that's how we've been viewing it.
Right. I'm good. I can't hold myself without asking this question. It's a good one. How accurate is the test creation, Eric, with the AI?
Yeah, great question. Obviously it varies depending upon, how good the requirements are, the complexity and all those types of things. What we've seen based off of our internal testing and work that we've done with customers is the AI is typically somewhere around 80 to 85%, accurate. So while that's really good, and of course that's going to save you a lot of time, it's still going to, again, require some review to find those ones where maybe it missed the mark and maybe you have to change the prompts next time when it generates the test and so forth. So that can get more, accurate as you kind of start using it, improving it. But overall, that's the statistics that we've seen so far.
Great. Thank you, Eric. And I would like to thank everyone for taking time to participate in this webinar. Hopefully you have some insightful takeaways. And if you find any question which you couldn't ask now, feel free to send an email to info@edactin.com, and we'll be happy to answer those questions.